Pleasure that I wanted to take an opportunity to provide an update and kind of debut this project that we embarked on with the Conway School last year. It's actually been exactly a year since we completed this project, and I wanted to provide the brief overview and a summary so that U.S. City Councilors have some awareness of this project and how it will ideally form the foundation for a couple other projects that we would like to envision in the future. But before I do that, what I was hoping to do is have Scott Kavanaugh, who's a resident CPA member and a member of the Rail Trail Committee, to come and give a little bit of the background that led to this project, because it was through Scott's kind of enthusiasm that it got me really excited to really kind of pursue this with some level of aggression. So Scott, do you mind coming up? Scott's been very patient. I told him we'd be out at like 7:15.
That's what he tells all his guests.
Good evening. Jeff asked me to give just a brief 45-minute background on this. So I'll try to keep brief. Basically, you all know that here in Easthampton, we're lucky enough to have this gem of a bike path come through our community, thanks to the hard work of many people, and I'm looking at Barb over there. And for a number of years, some folks have been thinking about how can we expand upon this? How can we make this even better? And one idea that people have kept coming back to is the idea of connecting the bike path to our city schools. Just to give you kind of a, before we get to Easthampton, just to give you a nationwide snapshot, this is an issue that people have been thinking about a lot over the past 20 years or so. In 1969, 50% of U.S. school children either walked or biked to school. And by 2001, that number was down to 15%. So in 30 years, it was a dramatic drop, really in one generation. And coupled with that, we've seen a dramatic increase in childhood obesity. We have 25 million obese kids in America. Also, studies have shown that kids who ride their bikes or walk to school have greater levels of concentration while they're in school. And so with that significant decrease in who's biking and walking to school, fewer and fewer kids are getting that benefit. Also on a community level, it's estimated that 20 to 30% of morning traffic is due to parents dropping their kids off at school. So the more kids we can get getting to school either by walking or biking, it takes cars off the road and decreases traffic. So those are all kind of stats that communities around the nation are looking at, and there's a number of communities around the country, really in the past 20 years that have tried to reverse this trend. So in Easthampton, just to give you kind of a background of what's happened in Easthampton, in April of 2017, the Manhan Committee met and talked about rail trail expansion possibilities and determined the three highest priority expansion priorities and sent a letter to then Mayor Cadger. The top of the three highest priority, the top one was to expand the rail trail to the proposed new school site. In the next year, in 2018, we looked at that further. Realized that one of the main sources of funding for these projects in the Commonwealth is through the Safe Routes to Schools program, which is through the Mass DOT. In order to have that funding available to us, we needed to be an active member of Safe Routes to School. So we sort of reactivated our membership in Safe Routes to School by doing a couple things. One was having a bike and walk to school day, which we did in 2018 and repeated in 2019. I was part of that day both times. It was very, very successful. Had a lot of kids participate. A lot of kids really excited about this. The second thing we did is we had a survey that went out to parents of students in the school system. Unfortunately, it was right at the end of the school year in 2018, so the response rate of that survey was really low. But what we did find with that survey, the results, what it did suggest is that especially in the elementary schools, Easthampton has a higher than average rate of walking and biking to school. And in Maple School in particular, Maple School had over 50% of respondents say that their kids either walk or bike to school. So we've got a lot of amazing foundation for this in Easthampton, and now we have the challenge of we are moving our school children. We're moving our school children to a site that is further from a lot of residences, and so while many people are thrilled about the new school, and I am too, I do see this as a challenge that we really want to address. How do we keep our high percentages of kids walking and biking to school while moving the school to a place that's further from where a lot of them live? And really one of the biggest ways that this could be possible is by extending the Manhan Rail Trail to the new school site. Parents, in survey after survey, why do kids not bike and walk to school? It's because parents don't feel safe. And they don't feel safe when there's not a safe way to get there, when they have to cross busy streets. And so this would be a way to provide a safe access to the new school for Easthampton school children. And so building off that, so this is something that had been percolating for a long time. As part of this, I approached Jeff, and then in September of 2018, city planner Jeff Bagg and Marilla Chappelle and I went for a nice bike tour where we rode around and looked at the potential ways that this could happen. And I think it was really at that time that sort of this mantle got kind of handed off to Jeff. He ran with this a little bit, and he could talk about how from all that it kind of evolved into this presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
So I really appreciate Scott's enthusiasm about it, and the overview is what leads to this point in time. And I think where Scott kind of described it as a challenge, I think it's actually an opportunity, and I think that that's what this is all about, is looking ahead. For a nominal fee, the Conway School does projects like this, and what I feel like we got is a wealth of information. Knowing the time and how long we've already been here, I'm going to give you a cursory overview, and I'm going to skip, this is not the whole report, but I'm going to skip, there were 3 community meetings. They were well attended, as a lot of our meetings have been, good participation levels, and so that is documented in the report, and there's a lot of context and background information about where our population centers are and where our people live and kind of their current modes of transportation. But jumping right in, someone along the way gave me this article from 1994, and I think it's out. I'm sure I could be corrected. Oh, it says this is the Coleman Road. This is from people who were envisioning the rail trail before it existed, and for me, it's really a piece of inspiration that this is not too wild and crazy. It's a level of commitment that people have to understand that needs to be there, but it's not. This is how things start, and then this picture is the celebration for when the bridge was put over Route 10, and unfortunately I wasn't there, but to me it's a party and a celebration for years of worth of work, and so that's where this is kind of motivating me. This map, I realize you cannot see, but what it shows is a concentration on the school property, and I think what Scott said is that the Whitebrook property had been identified preliminarily for a long time. It's listed in the 2008 master plan as a potential site, and in the master plan, and I'll get to at the end, it's identified as a goal. So, as part of my job, I'm trying to not create new far off projects. I'm trying to still go through the master plan and projects that have already been identified, and where there's funding is the key. And now we have this opportunity with the new school under construction that people are going to start thinking about this. And so the Conway School was asked to look at how can people get to the property. And there are multiple paths, but I'm just going to choose a couple from the report to highlight. And so this is an image. On the lower part of the image, you can see Whitebrook. there is a patch of woods, but not very far through that patch of wood is are Williston's athletic fields. You can see the track, and then to the right, just in the top of the page, the middle of the page, sorry, is Nonotuck. And then you can see going kind of to the top of the page is the high school. And then as you go down where item B and A are streets where that ultimately connect to the rail trail. And so what we looked at was the feasibility of certain routes. And this is a route that was identified way long ago and is listed in our Complete Streets Prioritization Plan as an item to consider. These are some images that are difficult to see, but A is if you're familiar with the area, you leave the rail trail and you cross through private property, happens to be a manufacturing company, and you go up one of our city streets, and then you have this option. You can choose Daly Field, or you can go to Williston. You can enter into Nonotuck Park, and so it's a very viable sort of route that many people are currently taking. And then the image on the D is actually South Street. So the junction of the rail trail at South Street, and you go up South Street, and not too far from there you are at the new school site. These are just additional images of E is Williston Fields. That there's potential opportunity to partner with Williston, and they've done some work in those woods to go over a brook. So if you have not been out there is a bridge suitable for bike and pedestrian traffic to cross. Then sort of looking at Whitebrook, which is at the top, and going generally south, you can see Treehouse Community is listed there as item F. And then what became really apparent in looking at this is that from Plain Street, there are a series of protected open space parcels that the city owns that could create that already create this kind of network, this available land to potentially cross over. And so taking the big picture, the Plains is one of our high concentrations of the population, but it doesn't have, unfortunately, it doesn't have any kind of access to the bike path. So this is a lofty goal, but this is something that seems worth pursuing and noteworthy. And it would be there in the report. There are some case studies of other communities who have done the more rustic and rural kind of path or multi-use path through similar properties. This is the route that looks at South Street, and then I did want to at least acknowledge that through this there was this clear observation that we have a large utility easement corridor through the city. It's wrought with a lot of difficult conversations with utility companies who typically don't want public accessing their properties, but it is listed, and it's important because it basically traverses part of our entire city. And the report really does a good job of looking a little bit more broadly. So this is Holyoke Street going up 141 towards the mountain, and there's an observation that there's a large population of our community that lives off of Holyoke Street that has to go around water. And water was identified as a really nice feature. We love our ponds, but they create a barrier for people to get to places, in particular, like if we're looking at the school. So this is a little bit of a vision that could potentially cross National Pond. And it's not something that's unique. So this image is one of the pedestrian bridges that used to cross Lower Mill Pond. So our mills were once manufacturing hubs, and the people who worked in the mills lived in New City, and they used to cross a pedestrian bridge over Lower Mill Pond. And this is the image that kind of illustrates that right now people have to traverse the entire length of Everett Street and back and forth. And the one note I do have is that there are some dash lines depicting potential routes across Lower Mill Pond, and if I had caught this sooner, I would have taken that dashed orange and I would have dragged it more towards the middle. But I think the report finds that someday putting some kind of pedestrian access over Lower Mill Pond would open up a lot of opportunity. And so this is where we go kind of big picture, which is if you look at New City and they could access the bike path in a more direct manner, then once on the bike path, if we're making another connection from the rail trail to the school, then we've created this loop and this way for people to get to the new school property via the bike path. So just, I think this is near the end, but just there are other things that quickly become apparent and that are supported by our other studies. So picture A is Route 10. You've left West Street. You've gone over the Manhan River, and you're going up towards, let's say, CVS. So this proposes, a side path, this widening of the sidewalk to create a multi-use path along Route 10 to get people out Route 10. And this is not a new concept, but these students at the Conway School heard public feedback. They looked at it and they're like, yeah, this makes sense. This needs to be on your list. This is an important, area to look at in the future. So I am almost done, but this is the master plan. These are prioritized strategies. Which is kind of rare, actually. A lot of times master plans just give you the blanket list, then they're not prioritized. But item number 2 was to extend the rail trail to Northampton, which we've done, to Southampton, which has been done, and we need Nonotuck Park and the schools to be under consideration, at least at some point in the future. The recreation section really emphasizes, so this is 2008, make connectivity a priority, give residents and visitors a safe way to walk or bike between trails, parks, and downtown. And then the specifics are connect Nonotuck Park to the rail trail, connect the trail to schools, and then create more pedestrian and bike-friendly routes throughout the city. Again, strategy 5 is the transportation section, establish a safe routes to school program, and then this is the master plan map. It's a little busy, but if you look at the 2 circles, the 2 blue circles at the bottom, just above that, this future new school site, connect to trails. And then there's arrows kind of showing you that you're close to Nonotuck, you're close to neighborhoods, and there's this desire. So my point being that to continue this discussion is not a very new idea, but there's a new set of there's new momentum, and there's opportunity to explore. So the open space plan obviously touches on that, and then I did stop here because the text is so small in the complete streets plan. But many of these projects were also identified in the prioritization project in 2017, and these types of projects are extremely beneficial when we do ultimately apply for grant funding, to show that this is not a random idea out of the blue. This has been sort of talked about, supported, and so part of my reason is to make sure that City Council knows that we have this Conway School report, make sure that some of our residents who are interested in this can find it on the Planning Department's website. And then I think we're going to continue, a conversation with the Conway School. They've come back to me and asked about looking more closely at the Plain Street to Whitebrook property, because there's a lot of uncharted territory. No one's ever really looked at the feasibility, but it's an opportunity that I don't want to pass up, while also pursuing that other connection. So. Scott got me all jazzed. We took a bike ride. It was really fun, and I think it's an important project. I didn't plan to say this. We are doing many things. So I think it's easy for people to pinpoint specific issues that are currently happening, and those are really important. But we should not stop continuing to take a bigger picture look at a variety of different things. So this is not to take away from looking at infrastructure, because we're also doing that. But this is also just continuing this other dialogue and discussion that is really important, that we don't stop, at least talking about it. So.
100% agree.
And just actually off of Jeff's comment, I would just say that the importance of doing these studies connect to the stacking of grants we've been so successful to. One of my big concerns around this plan when it came out, and I want to be very clear to the council and to the public, New City does not have access to some of the most rich leisure opportunities and also connection. They also are a part of the city. When you look at income and poverty, it's pretty high. Along these plans, including the bridge across Lower Mill Pond, this is part and parcel with really taking a hard look at housing and how you keep housing in that area affordable, and it's important for across all age groups. But I would just want to send kind of a shot across the bow that these projects, these plans, for myself and for my administration, clearly connect with affordable housing, and some pretty hard asks coming up of this council around how we do that, to, I'm sure, really hard conversations in our community that will not necessarily maximize property to its biggest economic potential. It takes a while to pull them all together, but there is a common theme, and we want to back that up. But so I just wanted to quickly say that.
Jeff, this was great. Thank you very much. This was unbelievable. What's the next concrete step that you're going to take to have the Conway School do a little bit more broadening of some of their planning? Is that the next thing we can look for? Or?
Yeah, that's what I anticipate being something that potentially would happen in the spring. The route from Plain Street requires a lot more investigation, but I am not shy about pursuing multiple elements at the same time. So I think the other route that shows promise is more potentially more immediate, which is this vision from the rail trail, if only getting to the high school. Yeah. You know, I think this picture really shows that while Whitebrook by car is a little bit more distant, we actually have a different type of hub taking shape. It's already there, but the proximity of Whitebrook to Nonotuck and the proximity of Whitebrook, Nonotuck, and the high school are really important to be aware of. This is not a great distance. B shows Hisgan Ave as just, it may not be the only route, but it is one of the most direct. So my purpose of mentioning complete streets is that there's potentially multiple funding sources available. I think to the mayor's point, when and if it all takes shape is still unknown. So, you know, we have other, potential projects that are suitable for complete streets, but for safe routes to school, beginning to build the argument as Scott kind of laid out, we talked about potentially doing another survey and gathering more data, but to be preparing for some kind of potential use of safe routes to school funding, which we have this compelling case, whether it's before the school's done or soon thereafter, that we've been looking at this for quite some time, and I think there's always this timeline and this continuum of when funding seems like it's the most viable. So, did I answer that? I know it's not abundantly clear. I mean, it is somewhat dependent upon funding and where we can access funding and the things that they're looking for. But that's been one of my primary purposes, is to update our plans so we have a long list of viable projects to pick from.
Right. Councilor Rossio.
I just wanted to thank Scott Kavanaugh for coming, and it just really shows how when you're passionate about something and you put the time and effort, you can really make change in the city, and I find it's really inspiring. So thank you for coming out. And also when I moved here in 2009, I remember that my landlord in the house we were renting said, "Oh, and they're supposed to be extending the trail to Northampton," and it sounded like one of those things that might happen. And then I was at that celebration on the bridge, and so it is fun to see the change happen and the people's intentions become reality. So just thank you.
Councilor Peak.
Yeah, thanks for all this. This is great. One thing that Scott said that really kind of struck me and sobered me was that when it comes to Maple School, which is my precinct, such a high percentage of students are walking and biking right now, and all of them are going to they're about to lose that opportunity effectively, when with locating the school on the other side of the pond. So if there's anything that we can do to start talking about some way of creating some sort of passage over Nashua Pond, I would be really, really interested in, so like the thing that you just showed, like I'd be very interested in seeing whatever I could do to help make that happen. That's getting them the opportunity to do that is a huge priority, I think.
Great.
What Councilor Peak just said, I won't repeat it, and but I agree. Regarding the, I've looked a lot at the Hisgin Avenue smoke, for lack of a better term, and it seems like of that entire route, the linchpin, not you, not Councilor Lynch, but is actually the Hisgin Avenue access route. Is there enough room on that street to create a separate bike path, or would you have to take a lane? Would you have to make that street one way?
We haven't gotten that level of detail.
Okay.
It's a perfect next step to continue to explore feasibility. I can't answer that.
Okay.
Councilor Lynch?
So I grew up on Plain Street, and then I moved to Apple Tree Lane, which is right where that entrance is on Plain Street, and I know it all too well. That's how I used to get to Whitebrook when I went to school there. I used to ride my bike through the trails and everything in the back there. I do know that it's great and it's perfect access. My only question would be, like, what would the future plan after that, if that was the route we went, to look at, say, people on Campbell Drive, right? What choices do they have to getting to that access? Is it Strong? Is it Line? What's the best way? Hendrick Street, to try to get some of those people, because there's not a direct route. They'd have to go one of those roads, and they're pretty busy. It's still better than what they have for options now, and I think it's great, but I think we should just keep that in the back of our mind. And then also Brook Street, at the end of Brook Street, has that access to like the soccer fields. I don't know if that's been looked at as an option, and I don't know who owns those properties, but that goes directly to the backside of Whitebrook and the back soccer fields. So I don't know if that's been looked at, and that might be private lands too. But.
There's definitely been consideration of that, and I think you seem to have captured that the city doesn't own it, so that is like one of the perceived hurdles, whereas shifting it over, the city owns a series of open space parcels. The way the report is structured is it clearly identifies that there may be other options or routes, but the idea is the driving force of this, and any opportunity I have to drill down deeper on any of the sections, I will take them to kind of further each component along. Great.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
No, I don't.
So-
I don't.